Hello everyone, welcome to Winthrop in the World. I'm Paul Baskin, and with us today is our state senator, Lydia Edwards. Senator Lydia Edwards, thank you again for joining us. I think it's your third time on the show.
Yeah.
Thank
you for having me. Thanks for this opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. So a lot to ask you about. Economics, I think, is a pretty important one. We're now in a week, at the time of this taping, a week into the federal government shutdown. There's reports out that the state of Massachusetts is losing something on the order of $4 billion in federal effects, and I'm not even sure how well that could be calculated given some of the things that are important to the state, like higher ed. I'm just wondering if you could sort of give a sense right now as to what it looks like in Massachusetts and for obviously the town of Winthrop in terms of the overall budget situation. Are we potentially getting into a world now where this is really going to be a big difference in the economy of Massachusetts, that maybe the sort of the good times are kind of rolling back a bit?
I don't want to predict. I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't want to get too far out ahead.
Yeah.
In the legislature, what we're hearing and what we're talking about is preparing for a tighter budget. That is true. And looking at ways in which we are going to maintain the course, maintain our services, and hopefully avoid having to use our rainy day funds. So right now, I want to say that our diagnosis for our economy is stable.
Okay.
And booming times, great times, honestly, Paul, not everyone ever has experienced that. Maybe our corporations did, maybe our developers did, maybe other entities, and there was a good economy and we did have low unemployment, but there've always been consistently people struggling to pay the exorbitant amount of rent or trying to buy a house.
So what are you seeing then happening in the town of Winthrop in terms of either businesses potentially being at risk of closing or people being at risk of not being able to stay in their homes? Is there a sort of any way to sort of give a guide as to whether we're at a significantly different period in that than we have been for the last few years?
I think it's way too early to be able to give that. But I will say if I'm seeing any impact locally, a lot of that is from tariffs.
Okay.
A lot of that is from increasing unemployment. That was happening before the shutdown.
Yeah.
So if I'm seeing anything, I have had a spike in unemployment calls to my office and trying to navigate that system, and people have been on ungodly and long delays and trying to get paid, and it's something we need to fix. But that was an issue before the shutdown.
Right. Okay. It's also political season here in Winthrop. We're having the election coming up on November 4th.
We do.
We do.
Oh.
You don't have to do it. But housing remains a big issue. We've also, as you know, as part of this, have had an extended situation over an attempt to recall a sitting member of the town council, Max Tassinari. I'm just wondering if you could maybe, I want to ask some questions about it, but just sort of big picture, what do you see going on? Like are we in a healthy state here in the town in terms of our political dialogue?
That's a lot of a question, right? But so let's break down some little things in terms of, the state we're in Winthrop. This is campaign season, so people are picking sides and analyzing and criticizing our elected officials, and that is normal and a healthy part of democracy. We want people to be able to speak and to be able to have opinions and to be able to not agree. Do I think that it is healthy in terms of some of the tone and rhetoric I've seen online? Not always. Some individuals have taken it too far, videotaping myself and other people volunteering on campaigns and calling us Antifa. It's shameful and embarrassing. But that's one small aspect of the political discourse. I don't think that's definitive of everybody in Winthrop. In terms of the season and people running and the recall effort, it failed. So I'm really hoping people can move on from that.
What about the state's role in what happened? I mean, the state got involved in the sense it kept getting asked in terms of its opinion on what to do. Are you comfortable with the role the state played in sort of adjudicating this recall effort? And of course, it was the court decision in the end as well.
I was going to say, I understood that local officials and town council kind of sought out the advice of the state.
Okay.
And so I don't know what else the Secretary of State could have done besides respond.
Right.
But the ultimate judge or the ultimate decision maker was the SJC. And that's their role as the courts, is to make those decisions.
What about the issue with the Board of Registrars? As you know, I believe that there was the issue where at one point we have in town three appointed members plus the town clerk are on the Board of Registrars and the registrars, and the issue came up as to their decision to get involved. Do you have any thoughts on that and where we go from here on that?
So I had to do some research, honestly, to read a little bit of the charter and some of the advice from the Secretary of State's office, and I actually got more confused, honestly, than I thought would be clear. But it seems that the Board of Registrars' involvement was misplaced, and it seems that if there was an issue with the initial decision from the town clerk, which was that there were not sufficient amount of signatures, the next step should have been to go to Superior Court. The proponents of the recall effort should have gone to Superior Court to challenge it there. I don't know that I don't see, and the SJC agrees, that there was any jurisdiction for the Board of Registrar to come in to overrule, no appellate authority to undo a decision from the clerk.
So we won't go terror on this, but just one of the issues is the whole method of recall. It seems like it's been threatened a few times in town and now carried out to the extent it was here. The law, as it was been shown, was that in Winthrop you need 20% of the registered voters, and after the fact, some of the opponents of the recall said that's too high a level, that we should have, that in the spirit of democracy they should be allowed to at a lower level call for someone to be removed from the council. Do you have a sort of a general take on how to deal with that? I mean, whether there needs to be a more robust way of pulling back on a sitting elected member of your legislature or your town council, or is that unreasonable? That really is meant to be for something that's a really like a high crime kind of thing?
I think the standard is a standard, and this town set that standard with cooler heads and neutrality before this came up. And that standard was 20% of the registered voters, which I believe was 2,800 or so signatures that was required. That's the standard, right? And the recall effort failed to meet the standard. It doesn't mean that they failed in terms of a movement, in terms of reaching out to people, in terms of galvanizing individuals, that they were successful in that.
Yeah.
But the standard wasn't met. And the standard wasn't met when they tried to recall, I think, Hannah. At some point, there was an attempt to recall Hannah Belcher.
Yes.
And there was another recall on Joy Ello, or they tried to. So the standards have not been met.
Right.
And so I think that the standards were clear, in black and white, and you don't change them or the goalpost to suit your individual goals.
Right. Last night here on WCAT we had the town council president's race. I realize this may be aired at different times, but this is when it was relative to us right now. And they covered a bunch of topics, of course, one of which was the issue of what to do about the fact that Winthrop is facing rising sea levels and how to handle that, and whether the town and to what degree the town should build walls or buy out homes or protect people. And this gets into state funding as well, because and in fact federal funding as well. I'm just wondering what you can add to this sort of general understanding of how to handle that. Should there be, I mean, there was talk there, and there has been talk in other forums about whether everybody in town should expect that as the sea levels rise, they should somehow be protected, or we should have some kind of a boundary, or do we need some kind of a better common understanding, I suppose, the way of asking it, of what to expect as this progresses in our lives?
I think we need a common narrative, and we need to all agree that climate change is real, and no one community, city, or town is responsible for trying to stop it, or trying to fix it, and they can't be. This is a statewide, nationwide, worldwide issue, and it hits us in a very hyperlocal way to the point that there's water in our basements. So we need to talk, we need to see it as the individual issue, but know that it is a global Commonwealth's problem. So I don't agree that this is something just for us to fix with our dollars. I don't think we can afford to, and I don't think we should have to. I personally think that it's a Commonwealth's investment issue, and we need to be, I support, for example, the Coastal Resiliency Fund that Governor Healy put forward just for the 78 coastal cities and towns, $100 million to help with coastal resiliency, to build the seawalls, to build the berms, to do all of these different things to help protect our cities and communities along our, thousands of miles of shoreline.
Right, but $100 million wouldn't even fix everything here in Winthrop, I don't think. If we're talking about the first project they're working on, it was looking like it's 14 million and there's 10 of them. So I mean, is it reasonable for the people of Winthrop to expect that they're somehow going to be protected by taxpayer funding from somewhere else in the state or in the country?
I think it's reasonable that we should, yes, I think we should, well, first of all, they're taxpayers to the Commonwealth, so we should be expecting to get some of our money back. If we're paying into the Commonwealth's fund, then the Commonwealth should be able to help invest back into us. And if you don't invest back into us, it's not as though climate change will just stay in Winthrop. You have to invest. And if you're going to be fixing this issue, and if you're going to be working on a true solution, no city and town can be forgotten. Will we have to pay more or think about more? Yes, I can say individually, I live in East Boston. I live by the tunnel. And I bought my house almost 20 years ago or so. I did not have flood insurance at the time. And then all of a sudden, I had to have flood insurance. It was very cheap. And now we're looking at, $4,000 a year. So that is an individual cost that I have to take because of the federal flood zone maps. And so you're going to see individually, yes, we're going to end up paying more because more of these homes are going to be in flood zones.
Right, but we're hearing discussion that, well, people who live in those zones chose to live in those zones, and therefore the government shouldn't have to take care of them. I'm just wondering.
That's not true. I didn't choose to live in a flood zone. The flood zone chose my house. So that's not true. And also this is a beautiful town. People choose to live with their family. Their family has been here for decades, and I don't think that that's the right approach or right way to say things. You chose to live there, therefore you suffer. They say the same thing about people who live near the airport. Oh, what are you complaining about noise? Yes. I pay taxes, federal and state, for equality of life. And the airport chose the community. You came here. So no, I am going to complain. I am going to push back. I'm going to demand mitigation for all of those things.
And thank you for mentioning the airport, because there is another obviously big issue there too. Not just the noise, but the pollution. There's concerns, long-standing, but it's certainly hearing them again now about the health effects of people living right under the pathways.
Pathways, yes, and the fact that they are redoing one of the runways has particularly impacted a lot of people in Port Pines and area and Revere, and it's just not noise pollution because it's annoying. It impacts your heart, and those health conditions, as well as the microplastics that we are concerned about as well, being dropped down on us. And so the question is, and I'm actually going to go to the CAC meeting, Community Action Committee, I think it is, tomorrow, to talk about how we get appropriate mitigation that is actually meeting the real needs. And talking about the real problems. We don't want to pretend that this isn't real or that this is debatable. Things are coming down in the air. We are dealing with noise pollution. It is impacting our hearts. And I want to massport when we meet with Reach Davies, I want that to be the facts that we're dealing with. So then you come up with mitigation, whether that's expanding the maps for the windows, the soundproof windows, whether that's putting more HEPA filters in our common areas where our children are gathering, because their skulls, we found that for the younger you are, the softer your skull is, the more likely the plastics can penetrate. So what are we doing to make sure that asthma, COPD levels are being monitored? And then if we find them, in East Boston, for example, for a while, they were providing the HEPA filters for the households with children with asthma.
Right.
So really, we need to start to have real conversations about the health impacts, not as theories, but as real, and then designing the mitigation to make sure that it meets that moment.
Right, and I gather right now we're in a little bit of a break here in Winthrop because of the repairs that you just referenced. I think it was a 3-month repair, and we're still in the middle of it.
75 days, I thought, for one of the highways,
Yeah,
or excuse
well,
me, runways.
For the runway that comes in sort of the closest into Winthrop.
Right.
Do we know when that work is done? Are we going to expect higher traffic on that runway once it's fixed?
I will be asking that. Actually, it's on a list of questions I'll be asking Mr. Davies tomorrow.
I see. Okay. I want to go back on the elections because that's obviously front and center right now. There's one of the sort of point of concern we're being hearing raised about the elections in general and about the housing issue in particular is the role played by out-of-town actors. There's allegations that some people are from the outside Winthrop are funding the campaigns or organizing the campaigns, both in terms of political candidates and in terms of the housing question. This is sort of long-standing, not at all specific to Winthrop, but what do you see as the general ethical, proper boundary on the role played by people from outside the town of Winthrop on events that happen here?
I think the narrative is interesting. I can say only to what I see. I go to knock on doors for candidates, and when I show up at the time, and I look around and I see people from Winthrop. I go to candidate forums, I watch the city council meetings, I go to their kickoffs, and I see people from Winthrop. So I don't know what the outside forces are that are concerning individuals. But Winthrop is strong enough to withstand that. I believe Winthrop and the people here trust each other and know each other and will look to each other before they ever look to, I don't know, some random flyer in the mail.
Well, you're talking about people knocking on doors, and I gather that's Winthrop people. I'm referring more to funding. And certainly we see in campaign reports that a lot of people get funding from outside the town, and that some of these campaigns, in particular housing, do have allies on both sides from outside the town.
Right.
Is that somehow a boundary that shouldn't be crossed?
Honestly, I don't know. If it's, I guess we'll know. We will find out. If the voters really resent that, we will see on November 4th. Okay.
And on the housing one, another part of this allegation is that the people on both sides of the housing, again, we're talking about 3A, which is the state housing law that requires towns to rezone to allow more multifamily housing, that some of the people in that case are real estate professionals or developers. Is that somehow improper on either side of the debate to have real estate professionals and developers involved in that discussion?
To have them involved in discussion? Absolutely not. I mean, we have people who are real estate agents who are vehemently opposed to 3A. We have people who are real estate agents who are vehemently supportive of it. And there are a lot of people who don't care either way. But that they're part of the discussion or that they have an investment in that, I can't imagine why that wouldn't be so.
Okay, and one other thing that gets, just maybe another one that gets raised on 3A is the fact that Boston is exempt, and I think that goes back to the creation of the MBTA maybe, well, for some reason Boston is treated differently than all the other cities and towns.
We have a zoning act for the city of Boston that is different, and we have a whole line of zoning that is exempts Boston from particular zoning for all sorts of things, not just 3A.
Right.
So it's, and we also have a different infrastructure. We have this BRA, or which is really what I think.
Boston Redevelopment Authority?
Boston Redevelopment Authority is the old name. It's the Boston Development Planning Authority, now BPDA.
Okay.
And that is a creature of statute as well.
Okay.
That has a board that sets zoning, that deals with urban renewal, and deals with so many more large projects on a regular basis. And then after that, it sets the planning. Then it goes.
Well, I just want to. The point I get is somehow does it make it unfair? I guess this seems to be the line of discussion.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what would make it unfair. Is Boston held
Because it's not part of 3A, because it's not
okay,
covered by 3A.
but being part of 3A, what would it do? What would be the impact?
Well, it would have to, presumably, if it would have to rezone parts of Boston if it were part of 3A, the way just.
It's already doing that, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to understand is whether it's the same basic thing is happening in Boston, just in a different manner, I suppose.
Boston is rezoned and upzoned to, when I got on this city council, they were talking about 50,000 new units.
Right.
Then it went to 60 somewhat thousand new units.
Yeah.
This is before 3A was even an apple in anyone's
Right.
eye. So I don't know what the difference would be.
Right,
I
okay.
mean,
Okay. Again, on the 3A, the major consequence the town is suffering, or at least is threatened with suffering, is loss of state grant money. I guess I don't know we still have a clear number on how much money the town has habitually gotten from the state, but one of the arguments being made is that it's really not that much, so that therefore rejecting the state on 3A is not that costly for Winthrop because we don't really get a lot of money that apparently we used to, because when DeLeo was the speaker, of course, we got a lot. But that was back in 2020 since he's not been speaker, and that therefore the consequences to Winthrop are not really that great from not ratifying or I mean, that's the argument. I'm just wondering what do you take on that from that argument?
I think anything that makes us less competitive for grants. And that should be just that's a fact.
Right.
There are a lot of grants funding. I was going through the fair share budget, for example, $13 million, huge win for us for water transportation. Right. And that was to procure boats, that was to do an inner harbor ferry, that was to create year-long, all of those things. That was passed. I was very proud of that amendment to push for it. That is connected to your compliance to 3A.
Okay.
So what we're finding is that a lot of money that is to come down the pipe, and as we're just talking about, there's going to be narrower and narrower amounts of money. Cities and towns will be competing for them as they always have been. These are grants, not bonds. So we are less competitive for a lot of money.
Right.
Because we are not compliant. That's just a fact.
Right.
No money is guaranteed to any city and town, let's be clear, right? We're not guaranteed anything. You have to apply for it. Or some actually just say outright, if you're not compliant, don't bother to apply. So I think that is not a narrative that makes sense to me, that just because we haven't gotten it in the past doesn't mean we won't need it in the future.
Right.
There are certain funds that didn't exist in the past. This water transportation money didn't exist before.
Right.
It now exists. The coastal resiliency funds of hundreds of millions of dollars, that didn't exist before. These are new funds that are just starting out and came out in the housing bond bill, came out in the economic development bond bill. So we're not even going to be invited to apply for them, or if we do, we are working at such a disadvantage because we decided not to comply with the law. So I don't agree that we are not, that there's very little, or that you can even say it's
Right.
small.
Right.
I think that the potential for loss is great and unnecessary.
Right.
When we could comply with the law, pass a plan that we can tolerate, and apply and compete for that money, and then still there's a statewide referendum to undo the law next year.
Right.
And to undo the zoning that comes with that law, that people could happily be collecting signatures for right now. So as I put in my op-ed recently and the Winthrop transcript, my proposal is get it while it's hot, get as much money as possible, and make sure that our coastline is secure, make sure that our berms are secure, make sure that our seawalls are secure, make sure that our homes are protected with the money that we can get, and turn around and fight to end 3A or amend 3A in a way to a zoning that really matches what we're doing.
Right. And if there is, like you mentioned, that's an effort at a statewide referendum to repeal 3A,
Yeah.
that would be in the November 2026 election. So
2026.
we're over more a year in a way.
Exactly.
So the town council here, the opponents on the town council here who don't believe we should comply with the law have, to some degree, hung their hat on the idea that your counterpart in the House of Representative, Representative Turco, has introduced 3 bills, one to outright repeal 3A, 2 to exempt Winthrop. They're citing that as a reason we don't need to comply with it now. But remember, we had Representative Turco on the show just a few days ago, and he acknowledged that those bills don't seem to have much of a chance of passing. I'm just wondering what you make of that, then, that we have town officials here suggesting that's a reason to hold off on complying with 3A when the sponsor of the bill, Representative Turco, doesn't even think they're going to pass.
I can't speak to whether they're going to pass or not. What I can speak to is time, and time is money. We should be applying for the grants. We should be competing for these grants. And even if they were to pass, they won't pass before July 31st, 2026.
Okay.
Very likely. That's the end of the session, right? And then you have the repeal in November. So we're still talking about a significant amount of time of us not protecting our town, not getting resources for our town, being less competitive to get our tax dollars back. So I don't agree with that analysis in terms of just wait and we'll see what happens.
Right.
I think we should be proactive and then, fight for what you want.
Okay. Again, Representative Turco, because we talked about this for a while on the show, he made a few other comments related to it. I just want to maybe hear you on. One, he suggested that wealthier communities such as Dover, Sherborne, Weston, and Wellesley are somehow more advantaged under 3A. He also suggested that this is a sign that state leaders are trying to destroy small-town America. Just wondering if you have a thought on any of that stuff. Is it possible that there's a bias in this law in particular and other laws that favor wealthier communities in the state and maybe disfavor smaller communities?
This law gave Winthrop the opportunity to define its zoning.
Okay.
And we chose not to. But, so I think I would push back or at least counter with, there was an opportunity to say this is what the zoning will look like. This is where the multifamilies will be. This is how we will plan in a way that actually includes buildings that already exist, and we will have the zoning match that. So this was a flexible opportunity to get something done. So I don't know that this was an attempt to destroy any town in any way, shape, or form. What I could see, if they wanted to destroy small town America or small towns, they would have been much more draconian in how they wrote that law. They could have said there will be no more small towns. No town can exist without this, and therefore you will zone for X amount of units, and therefore you'll have this and this and this. They could have told them what to do and where to do it. But that's not what they did. They said these are the recipe that you need for your town. Now go cook with your planning.
Yeah.
And here's some money if you wanted some. They were willing to also fund.
How real is the threat that the state might not just respond to this by cutting off state aid, but actually come in and impose a zoning map on Winthrop that actually does add housing? Does that seem in the cards?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I genuinely have no idea about that. And I don't like to go down the parade of horribles of, what the state will or won't do, because I think the narrative of the state being scary and overstepping is not right. We are part of the state. This is not the town of Winthrop in isolation versus the Commonwealth.
Right.
And I don't like that narrative because I believe that we are part of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Right. One other thing, just I want to counterpoint too, which is there was, after the tragic or really horrible killing of Charlie Kirk, there was a memorial here in town. Representative Turco was invited to it by the Republican town chairman. Gather you weren't there, and I'm wondering if you might be willing to sort of give your perspective on that event in particular, on Mr. Kirk, if you're willing, and sort of what went on there.
Sure. No, first of all, I was there.
Oh, you were there. Okay.
I was not invited
I see.
by Mr. Caruccio. I was not informed by him. But actually, Hannah Belcher is the one who told me about it. And it was a public event.
Hannah's the vice chairman of the town council.
Vice chair, yes, vice chair. She told me about it, and it was a public event. And I thought that in keeping with the spirit of what I thought was the goal of the event, which was to say we can have discourse and disagree and still be respectful of each other, I thought my coming to the event and being present there was important, and I'm glad I went.
Okay. Do you want to say anything more about the person, Charlie Kirk, at all, and sort of his politics, or is that?
I didn't listen to him much, honestly, before he was killed, and I don't know him at all personally. Okay. And I can say only that no one should die the way he did. It was horrific.
Right. Where are we with the whole ICE situation in town? I mean, there was the one incident a while ago. It doesn't seem like we've been hearing about a lot of problems in Winthrop in particular. Does it feel like maybe that problem is passing us by, but at the same time, we're also hearing that there's a lot of concern in town. I guess the Hispanic population in town is large and growing, and there's sort of a quiet concern we hear within them. Is there anything you can sort of help tell us about where things stand right now? Are things calming down at all, or does it still feel very tense, especially for that community in Winthrop?
I think that there's more tension in, say, East Boston and Chelsea than Winthrop. It doesn't mean Winthrop is not impacted, as we know.
Yeah.
I do think that there is a genuine concern about the federal government and its its will bring, I don't know what they said they would be bringing to Boston, but that there'll be a vibrational effect over into Winthrop. I have not heard, in keeping my ears to the ground, heard about more ICE activity in Winthrop.
Right.
But I do think it only takes one or two incidents before terror, which I think is the goal, terror and fear, to get people to be concerned, or to have people take advantage of it and wear ICE hats and think it's funny, and I think it's cruel.
Why? I mean, I think I know the case you're referring to, and the person involved, I think, is just trying to give a political expression, or at least that's how.
I have no idea, and I wouldn't want to assume anything on his part. I'm telling you what I think of it. I think it's cruel.
Okay. Almost out of time, but I certainly want to hear you on MBTA. I know you're very concerned about service here, and you work hard on that, as far as I can tell. So I'm wondering if you could tell us what's the latest with the ferry service. Is it too early to know what it's going to look like next year? And also bus service. Is it changing? Because we had Ryan Callahan, the chief operating officer of the MBTA, on the show recently, and he said that the bus service really wasn't changing in any fundamental way here. So I'm wondering, what are you seeing?
So let's talk about the bus service. I had Phil Eng in my office like within a day or so after they changed it to the infrequent timing that really has messed up a lot of people's commutes, and that's something I've been pushing to get back to on the bus line. It's like every 30 minutes or every 45 minutes in the middle of commute. Right. And that's, I think, a horrible change that was not asked by the community in any way, shape, or form. And it's something that I'm fighting to get back to. And with regards to the ferry, we are pushing. I mean, first of all, we have a new boat, which was really exciting, that we got our own boat. Right. We separated from Quincy. And people need to think about how far we've come in the last 3 years. We used to have a boat that Winthrop paid for, was going into debt for. From that to now, we have weekend service. We didn't have that before. Right. We have 20-minute commutes for the most part if you're going into town. Right. We have a lot more on that boat. This week, I understand the frustrations. I've gotten the emails, and I was a little frustrated that I didn't get the heads up. Due to repairs, we've had to go back to the older schedule because we're sharing the boat again with Quincy while a boat is repaired. We hope by the middle of next week. Or maybe by the end of this week, but we will be back to our regular schedule programming. And
you mentioned that Winthrop, is not paying? As I understood, Winthrop pays about, is it $100,000 a year, or is that changed, or what's the question? We went into a contract with the MBTA so that we did not have to pay. I see. That as of this past year, or
no, years ago.
Years ago. So I've heard a $100,000 figure of what the town of Winthrop pays for the ferry. Is that not accurate? For ferry service? No. No. Okay. That's been around. But just one other thing. Ryan Callahan again from the MBTA was on. A big concern in town is about bus shelters, the fact that we have virtually none.
Very few.
And he said, I think surprisingly maybe, that's not something the MBTA will pay for. That's something the towns have to pay for. And we did put some earmarks in to get some of those built. Yeah. Okay. So nowhere near as much as we need. Right. Okay, we're past time. So again, Senator Lydia Edwards, thank you very much for joining us. It's very helpful, very informative. Glad to have you with us. Thank you. Thank you so much.